Walking on Two Legs and Four by peerlesspheach22. It was really not turning out to be the relaxed Sunday Katsuki had hoped for. First, he had returned from his early morning jog to find that the kitchen had run out of coffee. After glaring at the selection of tea and hot chocolate staring back at him, he made his way to the store. Not only were they out of his favourite coffee, his loud complaints about the store's shitty options got enough stares of disdain and recognition that he was sure Aizawa would hear of it. The walk back was where things went from bad to worse. After making the brilliant decision of taking a shortcut to the dorms, he turned a corner into an alley before walking face first into a girl on a bike. The girl yelped in shock and braked hard, but with a lack of distance between them, they both went tumbling to the ground with a clang of metal and a sudden flash of green. "I'm sorry, I think I hit you in my the kid started to mumble through teary eyes. Katsuki snapped. The events from the morning accumulated in a one-sided shouting match. His voice erratic as he yelled over her apologies and explanations, until she gave up instead, picking her bike up and riding away as fast as she could. After his yelling had scared away the poor girl, he turned back on his way to the dorms, feeling slightly guilty about his outburst. It was a bit of an overreaction, he could admit to himself. Strange, he noted. The dingy buildings of the back alley seemed to be getting bigger and bigger as he stepped further on, before disappearing completely in a haze of black. After thumbling around in the soft folds of darkness for a few seconds, he popped his head out to find himself much closer to the ground than he had anticipated, his clothes lying pooled around his feet. What the fuck was going on? Looking down at his hands nearly gave him a heart attack, as tiny pink beans looked back at him. A paw? He let loose a loud volley of curses that merely came out as pitiful meows as he took a closer look at himself. Light brown fur, 4 little paws, and was that a tail? A fucking cat! The dumbass kid had turned him into a fucking cat and then run off to God knows where with no intention of warning him. Well, he guessed she had tried to, but he'd been in no mood to listen. Fuck, maybe he was at least partly to blame for this entire fiasco. He lifted a paw, trying to set off a blaze, praying that his explosions had survived this weird transformation. Nothing. Well, wasn't that just wonderful? This day was just getting better and better, and here he was, stuck defenceless, where any stranger could whisk him away, and no idea about how to get out of this situation. First things first, he stepped out of the middle of the road as he tried to find a better place to avoid being spotted as he thought things through. Of course, since it wasn't Katsuki's day at all, he had barely stumbled a few feet, still disorientated on his 4 legs, before he heard a familiar voice. "Look at you. You're not lost, are you?" Heterochromatic eyes stared down at him, a lot closer than usual, as Todoroki crouched down on the pavement. Katsuki had been so distracted by his situation, he hadn't even heard his approach. Todoroki's face still maintained his trademark stoic expression, but his gaze was softer than Katsuki had ever seen, and a tinge of concern shaded his tone. Under different circumstances, Katsuki would have been quite happy to see him, even if he pretended otherwise. Might have even suggested a spar, but this was not it. "Does it look like I'm lost, you idiot?" Katsuki growled, or tried to, though it came out sounding like a startled yowl. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to startle you." "I'm not fucking startled!" "You seemed unsteady." He stepped closer, raising his hand as if to pet him. Katsuki let out another yowl before taking a step back, slightly steadier than before. The situation he was in was embarrassing enough without having to deal with Todoroki petting him. He needed to get to his room to hide until the quirk mercifully timed out. He'd never live it down if the rest of his classmates realised he'd been caught unawares by a kid. Todoroki seemed to get the hint, standing up and walking away easily. As he watched the teenager walk away, Katsuki huffed in resignation. He might as well follow Todoroki on his way back rather than risk getting picked up by some random extra and taken who knows where. Putting aside the last of his pride, he got to his feet and tried to catch up to the other. Todoroki turned around and glanced at him as he caught up. "Are you following me now?" He seemed surprised as he slowed down his pace a little. They walked silently, side by side, till they reached the dorms, a lot slower than they would have if Katsuki had been full-sized. "I'm not allowed to take you inside, you know," Todoroki murmured once they stood at the gates. As if he needed any help with that, Katsuki would slip through and find his way to his room easily enough. Before he could consider that plan of his any further, he was being scooped up into a pair of arms, and once again staring at Todoroki's perfect face from way too close. Katsuki swallowed his pride and let himself be manhandled this way, as he was zipped up in Todoroki's jacket with a whisper to stay quiet, before he was being carried against his warm chest, into the dorms, past the chattering students in the common room, up the stairs, and to his room. Todoroki's room was right above his, Katsuki noted. It would be easy enough to jump down through the balcony once he was left alone. However, Todoroki seemed to have no intention of leaving as he settled down in his bed and pulled out a book to read. Like on the walk to the dorms, he seemed content to ignore Katsuki, waiting for him to make the first move, despite his decision to kidnap him and sneak him into his room. Katsuki looked around the room, taking in the traditional Japanese layout, the tatami mats and the futon on which Todoroki sat, before turning his attention to the teenager. He observed him quietly, watching his lashes flutter as he read, leaning against the wall with one knee bent, looking utterly relaxed in a way Katsuki hadn't seen before. They had gotten closer to each other while training together these past few months, despite Katsuki's vehement denials of friendship, but seeing him at home like this with his walls down only intensified the feelings Katsuki was already developing for the younger boy. A few hours later, Todoroki finally seemed to have had enough of sitting around reading his book. He walked over to where Katsuki lay on the mat. "Are you hungry? Let me see if I can find something for you." He reached out to pet Katsuki, his hand moving slower, as if expecting Katsuki to back off again, before gently patting him between the ears. Katsuki arranged his features into a scowl, but made no move to get away this time. Todoroki laughed at his expression, giving him another pat, before getting up and making his way presumably to the kitchen. Katsuki considered making a break for it and leaving for his room through the balcony, but the look in Todoroki's eyes before he had stepped out to get him food made him stop. Curse his stupid soft heart for preventing him from making rational decisions. He wanted a little longer with this version of Todoroki, the one that brought home stray cats for no apparent reason and talked to them with that look in his eyes. Anyway, he had some time before he turned back. 48 hours, that was the usual time frame for these kinds of quirks. He should be fine staying with Todoroki for a little bit. Besides, it wasn't like he had any food stashed away in his room. This way, he would be at least able to avoid starvation. With those excuses in mind, Katsuki settled back down on the mat-covered floor with a little huff. A muffled shout woke him from his sleep. It was dark and Katsuki blanked for a moment before remembering where he was. In Todoroki's room, curled up on the makeshift bed the dual-haired boy had assembled for him out of a pile of blankets. A small sniffle sounded through the silence, prompting him to leave his bed and make his way to the futon where Todoroki lay, mumbling in his sleep. "No, please, don't. I'll be good, please." Katsuki knew that everyone at UA had their fair share of nightmares. It was not entirely unexpected with everything they had gone through. Katsuki climbed onto the futon easily enough before patting the sleeping boy's cheek with his paw as he let out a loud meow to wake him up. Damn, he missed his voice. In the pale moonlight, Katsuki could make out tear tracks running down his face before he opened his eyes with a gasp. Todoroki stared at him with lost eyes for a while before he seemed to come back to himself. "Oh, it's you. Did I wake you?" he murmured apologetically as he gently pulled him to lie down next to him. Katsuki went willingly, a million questions running through his head as he burrowed in the warm blankets. Todoroki seemed uninterested in an attempt to falling back asleep, his heart beating wildly in his chest as he stared at the ceiling with his eyes open. Katsuki looked at him curiously, reaching out to pat his face and receiving a head scratch for his effort. He grumbled internally, really regretting his lack of words at this moment. After a long silence, just when Katsuki started to think maybe Todoroki had fallen asleep, his voice cut through the silent night. "It's my dad. My nightmares are always about his training, what it was like back at home when I was a kid." Katsuki did have some idea about his situation, having eavesdropped on Todoroki's conversation with Deku back in their first year. "I wasn't allowed to see my siblings. I was always alone when I wasn't being trained or homeschooled." Katsuki had no idea how that would affect a kid, being an only child himself, but he always had Deku and his ragtag group of friends that followed him around through kindergarten to middle school. He doubted Todoroki had any real friends before his time at UA. He hissed in frustration, itching closer to offer what silent comfort he could, hoping Todoroki knew he wasn't alone here. He seemed to get the message across as Todoroki continued. I know it's better now that I'm at UA with my friends, but some nights I feel so alone, like I'm going to get locked away by myself again. He sounded so small. Katsuki had no idea how to make it better. He got to his feet, settled onto Todoroki's stomach, chest to chest, in a weird parody of a hug, his legs too short to do any actual hugging. You're a lot sweeter than you come off. Reminds me of someone I know, Todoroki murmured, amusement lacing his tone as he pulled Katsuki close. Katsuki was averse to physical contact by nature, but this was Todoroki, bearing his vulnerable side beneath the ice prince exterior for the first time. Sure, it was unspoken knowledge between them that Katsuki had some idea of Todoroki's past, but this was still new to Katsuki. He had never been the direct recipient of Todoroki's confidence in this way. The glimpse of this softer side awakened his protective instincts, as Todoroki's breaths finally fell into a relaxed rhythm. The next day, Todoroki rushed off to class after feeding Katsuki and warning him to stay quiet. Katsuki grumbled, wondering if the idiot was seriously expecting a stray cat he had picked up to understand the request, even as he obliged. He took advantage of the other boy's absence to relieve himself in the bathroom as he pondered on his options. He had barely hit the 24-hour mark at this point, so the quirk wouldn't be wearing off until at least another day. Just another day, and he would be able to use his voice and his quirk and opposing thumbs and not be able to comfort Todoroki as he wanted to when he had his nightmares. Because that wasn't them. Even as their relationship grew, seeing Todoroki with all his walls down was not a privilege that Katsuki had, even if he wanted it. He didn't know if he would ever be able to once he turned back. Shit. He'll stay just a little longer. When Todoroki returned that day, his usual calm demeanour was missing. As Katsuki made his way towards him, he bent down to pat him before settling down at his futon with his laptop open. Had something happened? Katsuki hovered near him, letting out a few embarrassing whines as he tried to understand what had gone wrong. Todoroki ignored him, alternating between typing away on his laptop and shooting quick texts from his phone, before finally giving up and lying down. As Katsuki was starting to panic, wondering if something had happened to one of the classmates, Todoroki seemed to finally deign himself to explain. It's Bakugo. He's missing. No one's seen him since Saturday, and he's not replying to any texts either. We don't know what's happened to him. He's been targeted before, and now... His voice broke. There are people looking, but we aren't allowed to leave now in case something happens. He sounded like he was ready to ignore that and sneak out to search anyway, but there was no way Katsuki could let that happen when he was right here. I'm just really worried about him. Damn it. Katsuki had been so distracted by his embarrassment about the situation, he hadn't stopped to consider the implications of his disappearance on his classmates. Those extras really cared too much. More than he deserved, really. Should he let them know he's fine? How would he even do so in his current form? His phone was upstairs in his room where he'd left it before heading out for his jog, and even so he doubted his ability to type a coherent message. He should start by trying to reassure Todoroki, he decided. He pushed himself onto Todoroki's stomach to look at his face, more comfortable with these physical displays of affection now. The quirk was probably messing with his habits. Whatever. Todoroki stared at him before reaching out to scratch his ear. You look a lot like him, you know. A small smile graced his face as he leaned over to place a kiss on Katsuki's nose. Katsuki was sure that if he wasn't covered in fur, he would be blushing furiously. Your eyes especially, though he would blow up the building before comforting me like this. He continued almost wistfully, while idly playing with his fur. Katsuki wanted to deny it, even though he knew it was true, letting out a half-hearted whine of protest. Though he had mellowed out somewhat during his time at UA, Katsuki still preferred to show his love for his classmates secretly, hidden by loud insults and excuses. His behaviour right now was only due to his lack of ability to do anything else. Katsuki would never admit it, but it felt nice to lie there and let Todoroki pet him. That night, Katsuki avoided the blanket pile and slept directly next to Todoroki, curled up near the other's chest. He would hopefully turn back after Todoroki left for classes, and be able to sneak out and reassure his classmates soon enough. Todoroki's sleep was uninterrupted all night. When Katsuki woke up, it was with his arm wrapped around a slim waist, and his face buried in the crook of Todoroki's neck. Wait, his arm? He got up fully with a jolt, looking down at himself in all his naked glory. Bakugo? Damn it. He raised his eyes to meet Todoroki's, who leapt away from him and onto the floor in a second. Katsuki missed the comfort of his warmth immediately. "What are you doing here? Where were—" His eyes raked over Katsuki's bare chest. "Why are you naked?" Look, I got attacked by a shitty quirk, okay? I'll explain everything. Can I borrow some pants first?" Todoroki stared. Fuck, this was seriously embarrassing. "Please?" Todoroki looked surprised at his unusual politeness, but he finally got up and rummaged through the closet for a while, returning with a pair of sweats and a t-shirt. He turned around to give Katsuki some semblance of privacy to dress up. "Explain." His voice had gone back to his usual monotone, nothing like the gentle tone he used to talk to Katsuki when he was in his cat form. So he did, wishing Todoroki would turn around so he could see his face. He told Todoroki about the collision and how he was initially planning to hide out in his room until being brought here instead. How he expected the quirk to time out soon enough without worrying anyone. Todoroki turned around and looked at him in silence when he was finally done. He looked completely apathetic about the fact that Katsuki had been privy to his nightmares. "Oi, Icy Hot, about last night," Katsuki began cautiously, the nickname slipping out in an attempt to get them back to familiar territory, before Todoroki's voice cut in. "I think you should leave now. Our friends and teachers deserve an explanation." He wasn't looking at Katsuki anymore, as he made his way to the door and held it open for him. The dismissal was clear. He would have to deal with this wrench in their relationship later. "I'm sorry," he murmured, uncharacteristically soft, as he made his way out the door. His classmates were not happy, to say the least. The common room exploded in a chorus of noise as he walked in after changing into his uniform. "Bakugo, where the hell were you? We were so worried. Aizawa-sensei had people looking for you. Kachan, are you okay? What happened?" Katsuki scowled, wishing his classmates were less annoying, but he couldn't bring himself to blame them after his disappearing act. "I'm only going to say this once, you shitty losers, so shut up and listen." So he began to talk, occasionally glancing over at Todoroki, who was avoiding his gaze and staring at his bowl of cereal. His friends turned their attention to Todoroki soon enough to affectionately tease him about his catnapping tendencies, while Ida pushed Katsuki towards Aizawa's office to explain his return. Everything seemed back to normal after that. Katsuki hadn't missed much in his classes, and after a stern talking to from Aizawa, he was sent back to take his seat. Well, not everything. Todoroki seemed to be determined to ignore Katsuki, avoiding eye contact and sticking to his group of friends. Katsuki felt like it was their first year again, where he saw Todoroki as a worthy rival, but barely registered on the other boys' radar. He had to find a way to fix this. He knew he would be embarrassed beyond belief if the roles were reversed and his crush saw him appearing weak, though with Todoroki's blunt nature he doubted that was the case. Not that he ever thought Todoroki was weak. What with everything he went through at his age, he just had to find a way to get Todoroki to stop shutting him out. 10 o'clock found him standing outside Todoroki's door, the borrowed clothes clutched in one hand as he raised the other to knock on the door. He still hadn't figured out exactly what to say when the door swung open. "Can I help you?" Todoroki sounded guarded in a way that made Katsuki's heart hurt. "Yeah, I just wanted to return your clothes, and say thanks for everything or whatever, I guess." Todoroki wordlessly grabbed the clothes he held out before making to shut the door. "Wait." The door swung back open a crack. "Can I come in?" Todoroki hesitated for a second, before swinging the door open fully to let him in. Katsuki gave the room a once-over, noticing his little pile of blankets had disappeared, presumably washed and neatly folded away in some corner of Todoroki's closet. "Bakugo?" Right. He wanted to clear the air between them. He turned around to face the other boy, who was still hovering by the door, as Katsuki wondered how to start the conversation. "Why are you ignoring me?" "Straight to the point it is." "I'm not ignoring you. Not any more than usual." He did make a valid point. They never did interact much during their classes, but even the little barbs they exchanged, or the unspoken conversations conveyed through a glance, had been missing today. Katsuki didn't know how to explain that he wanted Todoroki to just look at him again with open affection in his eyes, or speak to him in that soft tone. Todoroki's voice broke the silence after a few minutes of staring at each other. "Why did you comfort me?" "What?" Todoroki walked over to the futon and sat, staring down at his hands as he repeated himself. Why did you comfort me when I had a nightmare? That was why he was being so cold, after all. Katsuki walked over to sit next to him as he tried to explain. You were freaking out. What, was I just supposed to let you go through that when I was right there? Did Todoroki seriously think he was that much of an asshole to stand by and do nothing about it? You stayed in my bed all night. You even let me cuddle you. Was that a side effect of the quirk? Look, Icy Hot, I don't know if I was being extra touchy and shit because of the quirk, but I do know that if I had been myself, I would have done the same thing, okay? Because it's you. That was beyond embarrassing to admit, but if this was what it took for Todoroki to stop being all Ice Prince with him, he would do it. But why? We're not even friends. I mean, I think you as a friend, but you have been very clear that you don't consider me as one. Was this guy fucking blind? I'm only going to say this once, Harthy. We're friends, alright? Hell, I'd be anything you want me to be if I can stay by your side. So just talk to me, yell at me about intruding, whatever, I don't care. Just don't shut me out. Don't make this weird. Todoroki finally looked up at him then, the corners of his lips quirking up into a small smile. Anything, because it's me, huh? Of course he would latch onto that. At least his eyes were warmer now as he looked at Katsuki. Shut up, asshole, he barked, though the insult lacked any bite. But Todoroki was pretty damn perceptive when he wasn't busy being a dumbass. He moved closer to Katsuki on the futon, a teasing smirk on his lips. Why are you so against me referring to you as a friend, Bakugo? God damn it, he forgot how persistent Todoroki can be. Are you really going to make me say it? Katsuki grumbled, his face flushing red as he attempted to send a scathing glare at the other. Do you know why I was so insistent on being friends with you? Todoroki asked gently, as he reached over to take one of Katsuki's hands in his own. His grip tightened slightly when the other made no move to resist. Because I thought it was the most I could get. I never dreamt we could be more. Little clouds of pink dusted his cheeks at the confession, though he resolutely continued to maintain eye contact. Katsuki's brain short-circuited, his palms inadvertently letting loose a series of small explosions. He was probably dreaming, a latent side effect of the quirk. Maybe he'd wake up to find he was back in his room, alone in his bed. He'd be happy about that any other day. What? He said eloquently. Bakugo, I'm saying I like you. I like you. I like you. I like you. Todoroki liked him. Him! What the fuck? He was jolted out of his spiraling thoughts as Todoroki drew nearer, slowly giving Katsuki plenty of time to retreat. His eyes dropped down to glance at his mouth before Katsuki felt the soft press of slightly chapped lips against his. He stayed frozen for a second before his brain finally caught up, reaching out to grab Todoroki's face as he kissed him back. It was a sweet, chaste kiss, and they pulled back soon to look at each other, smiles on their faces and cheeks flushed. Are you going to sleep here tonight? Todoroki murmured as he drew circles on Katsuki's thigh. Shouldn't you at least ask me out first, Icy Hot? Katsuki teased, even as he got under the covers and held his arms open for the other to climb into. I will, right after you say it back. The smirk was back as he draped himself over Katsuki. Shut up, Icy Hot. Todoroki? I like you too. Go out with me? Todoroki kissed him. Hi. So, I actually do have a good reason for not posting for so long, and that is that, well, we went on holiday, and then we got back from holiday, and we didn't have any Wi-Fi when we got back from holiday, and we haven't had Wi-Fi for about a month. Well, we have, but it just isn't good enough to do what I want to do. And I was also ill, so you can probably still hear that in my voice. My nose is stuffy. But I finally managed to do it. Yay. Also, I have put up the speed paint of the thumbnail for this video. I don't know if that's interesting to anyone, but it's there if you want to watch it. So, thank you for listening to the end, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.